Now, John Flaherty, you've signed your share of baseballs, but your name's not part of the baseball. How cool is that?
Thrown a lot of those baseballs with Mr. Commissioner's signature on it. Great to have him here in the booth with us.
There he is, Bud Selig. Hey, Bud, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I knew it meant a lot for you to be here for the unveiling of the monument. Tell me why.
Wouldn't have missed it. I had a 37-year relationship with George, and very close with the family. We did a lot together. You know, it's interesting. There were few subjects that George and I actually agreed on, and I mean that. It is true. He used to kid me a lot about, you know, I'm running the Milwaukee, ordered the Milwaukee Cub, and of course he has the Yankees, but never did it affect our relationship. And so somebody here told me tonight, who worked in the front office, he said, I want to pay a compliment. George said, the one guy I can always trust is Bud Selig. And I felt the same way about George. One thing about George, if George gave you his word, that was it. There was nothing else to talk about. So, well, we wouldn't have missed tonight under any circumstances.
Now, you guys came into the game about the same time when you bought the Seattle team and moved.
Yeah, I was here in '70. He actually bought the club in December of '72, so I had 2 years on it. But he came in '73, and then it led to, boy, we went through a lot of stuff over the next 30 years or so. It was terrific.
I would have paid money, Commissioner, because I remember the old county stadium when I was a writer, and the Yankees would play the Brewers,
right,
and you two would sit in the box together just to
hear
hear the conversations that were
well,
going on.
I could sit here all night, but I'll tell you a great story. This happened in about '82 or '83. I was honored at County Stadium by a suburb, neither here nor there. There was a nice little ceremony, and everybody applauded. And that was it. I came back to the box.
Alex grounds one to third. Longoria, the long throw.
I came up to the box, and there was George. And he said, you know, it's really not fair. And I said, what is that? He said, everybody in the world thinks you're this nice guy, and I was. They should hear you during games. They ought to hear the things you say. And he was right. You used to watch games. I was actually worse than he was. And in '81, we played him in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'll never forget that. They won the first 2 games in Milwaukee, and I was mad. We came to Yankee Stadium, won the next 2, and I was in the clubhouse and left after the game, and the only 2 people, the elevator opens, there is George, and it's just me and George now and he says, well, buddy, I guess this is the way it's supposed to be, and they did win the 5th game, and a great game, but it was. We watched a lot of games together, and he also had a funny line. He said, boy, if I were going out in the field in New York right now, there'd be 3 weeks of garbage thrown at me. How can you do that here? And he laughed, but he was great. He was, you always knew where he stood. You may agree, you may disagree. And there were some days where he was difficult, and he would admit that.
I got to ask you, Commissioner, how's the game doing?
The game's never been more popular, Michael. Here we are in the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. I don't think anybody would quarrel. A lot of sadness out there. And I think, and I don't want to jinx this, I think we'll beat last year's attendance. And given the circumstances, that's amazing. The average team will draw somewhere between 2.4 and 2.5, which is stunning when you think about it. And so everything you look at, every criteria, the game has never been this popular. You know, not that we're not without problems, because, as my friend Bart Giamatti used to say, baseball is a metaphor for life. And, you know, you're going to have some problems. We've worked our way through it. Everything is just working well. We have the wild card is working again very well. You remember the criticism I took back in the '90s, and but it's worked out great. Great race in the National League West. There's still Atlanta and Philadelphia playing tonight and battling, and here you've got the Yankees and Tampa battling to win the division, get a home field advantage. So, Michael, John, I couldn't be happy with the way the year's going. The year's been great.
Now, obviously, a hot button issue is instant replay, because there have been some calls that umpires have made that you go, that's not right, because we have the technology, the slow motion replay. Is instant replay in our future?
Well, I never say never to anything, and we do have some limited form, as you both know. I've been talking to managers and general managers in particular, about it. And in spite of what some people tell you, I've very little sentiment for instant replay. Joe Torre and I talked about it here tonight, waiting for the ceremony. And I'm willing to do it, but as you know, and certainly, John, you understand, and Michael, you've covered this for a long time, baseball is a game of pace. And you can't make people sit around for 3 and 4 minutes at a time if you're going to do it forever on everything that happens. You know, I have a thing about not the length of the game so much as the pace of the game. So I'm willing, as always, to look at things, but I'm not wildly enthusiastic about it as we speak.
Well, there's Commissioner Bud Selig presenting a World Series trophy to George Steinbrenner. Thurman Munson, one of George's favorite players, and George had a lot of champagne bats in his time. He won 7 championships in the years that he owned the New York Yankees. We're here in the top of the 3rd inning, no score. On the night they unveiled the monument for George Steinbrenner in Monument Park, and we're lucky enough to be joined by the Commissioner of Baseball, Bud Selig. What was it like handing that trophy to George so many times?
It was amazing, and the first time that I did it, given our history, as you can see in that picture, he wept and he broke down. But he had said to me beforehand, I had just come downstairs and it had happened, and he came in and he said, "Buddy, I might not be able to control myself tonight. George, do what you want to do. It's okay." And I said, just let me get out of here because I don't want to have champagne dumped on me. And he laughed. Don't worry about that. And as soon as I was going to jump, boy, he just broke down and cried. It was very. I know how much it meant to him. It was '96, and it had been a while, and I know how frustrated he was. So
strikes out. You mentioned the wild card. Now, I was one of the people that didn't like it, and I like it now. But I'm wondering if it has to be tweaked, and I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
This series right here would be for all the marbles, but now it's not because both teams know, all right, we don't finish first, we're going to be the wild card. Is there something that can be done to ensure that there is something to play for, that there is a great advantage to winning the division and some kind of a disadvantage to winning the wild card?
Well, we've talked about that a lot. The thing, Michael, you have to remember in this, we only have 1 wild card per league as opposed to the other sports.
Right.
I mean, we only have 8 teams in the playoffs, so baseball has done great in that regard. You don't, oftentimes the wild card club has a great record all the time in the 90s for wins and so on and so forth. And we're going to talk about that in the future. That's a very fair question. I still think the home field advantage is great, but should we increase that? Well, we're going to think about that. That's fair to think about. There's no question about it. But the way these 2 clubs have been going, they're playing hard.
The Yankees obviously contribute a lot to revenue sharing.
Yes,
a lot of money.
Yes, they
and
do.
there are a lot of teams that spend it, and there are a lot of teams that don't seem like they spend it. How do you police that? Make sure that those teams do spend.
Well, we do police it. Let me try to. At every major league meeting, we bring that subject up, Michael, because it is fair. The union I don't think they would mind. Just went over all the numbers. They have every number, and they were more than satisfied. And so I keep hearing this, except there's no evidence. And look, just for the very fact that we just talked about Cincinnati and Minnesota and San Diego and Tampa and on and on and on. Look, it's never going to be perfect. And so I'm satisfied, but we do police that, and we will police it. Yes, the Yankees do contribute a lot, and I must say, get back to George again, much as he used to grumble about it, when we finally went to revenue sharing, which you have to have in sports, because if you have a team in Pittsburgh or Kansas City or Tampa or so on and so forth, and teams in New York, LA, and Chicago, you have to create a level playing field. And the Yankees have been great about it. And obviously they've done their homework very well, too.
Before we end with you in this inning, what do you think George Steinbrenner's legacy is going to be, Bud?
Dynamic owner, helped change the face of the game, and I think in a most positive sense. And I know, believe me, I was there for all the controversy. And let me say this to you. You asked me at the outset tonight, what's the state of the game? The state of the game, including all the economic changes I've made and everything else, which people has never been better. This sport has never been this popular. And so we've adjusted to the system. And George helped this game adjust to the system. So his legacy is really, when you stop and think about it, might be overpowering. I mean, George tonight should be very proud of not only how he left the Yankees, but he would agree most importantly, as always, what he did for baseball.